Greetings, everybody! Welcome to the Dracovin Empire. Are you ready to dive back in time? We're heading back to the past to learn all about the history of another interesting CCG, that TCG/CCG that you could have played and could still play to this day. Granted, most of these are out of print that I talk about, but we're heading back into one that's Dungeons and Dragons related. It's not Spellfire, no. We're going and talking about Blood War. You're ready to head back in time, I can open up a portal. Your host and guide here, Cantus Narrative and Dracovin. I do need a little bit of a tip here before you grab my hand to go through the time portal. Keep you safe when we go through there. Make sure you're liked, subscribed, over on the video side of things, or the YouTube side of things, and let me know. Have you played Blood Wars? Did you know there was something other than Spellfire for early D&D CCGs? Or would you try this one now that you hear about it? Because it's better than Spellfire. By a long shot. We'll get into it. Let's go. The Blood Wars. Oh, wait. We've arrived back in 1995. So where to begin with? Let's go over the basics of what Blood Wars was. Blood Wars is a CCG. It was created by TSR, and it's based on the Planescape campaign setting on a very loose note. It's also based around, well, its namesake, the Blood War, the battle between devils and demons that occurs within D&D and a lot of its mythology. So this combination of Planescape, Blood War, planar kind of things is the storyline that kind of exists here. The original designer was Stephen Shen. It's made for 2 to 8 players, with 4 or 5 being the best. You can usually play a game around 90 minutes, and it does involve some basic abilities of math and sort of things. It's not necessarily the most complex card game, but it's also not the easiest to learn about. And its release in 1995 was to be around TSR's 20th anniversary. Yeah, of March 1995. That was celebrating 20 years of TSR. This was the death of the TSR era. 20 years and it's almost dead. Yeah. Let's talk about TSR, because I think that's an important place to start with. If you do not know about TSR, hi, welcome. I'm going to give you a crash course on it. I'm not going to get into the full history of TSR. There are other video essays that talk about this, but this is the company that formed basically alongside of Dungeons & Dragons. When big names like Gary Gygax and the others that helped develop D&D created it, they also eventually created TSR. This was the company that was basically what was in charge of things. Tactical studies rules. That's the earliest incarnation of the name. Eventually became TSR. There's a lot of things to talk about, but this was the age when TSR was no longer under the control of Gary Gygax or Don Kay, the original founders of it. We're now under the control of Lorraine Williams, who was eventually the one that, in 97, sold it to Wizards, where they eventually just integrated into them. The basically integration of Wizards, of TSR into Wizards, and it finally kind of died off. That was in 97. So this is 2 years later, the company's basically dying and being integrated. And it's during this 95, 96, part of 97, that the death knell is being tolled. Everything's falling apart. Now, this is this is the era where we're getting Spellfire, who's already been out, and now Blood Wars. Let's talk about the setting. Planescape. Planescape is an interesting setting because it is all about the planes. The Manual of the Planes was originally published in 1987, and this was kind of one of the campaign settings that kind of developed out of that, and originally was published in 1994. So it's actually not one of the older campaign settings that existed here. Now, I will tell you, if you've been playing 5th edition D&D or anything familiar with it, you know they did come out with a Planescape book for that. It's fine. It's not as bad as the Spelljammer, in my opinion. But again, it's not a great book. It's not a bad book. It's a fine book. It really talks about Sigil more than anything. Sigil. I never know which one to pronounce that as. But anyway, regardless, it's all about that kind of city at the center of the multiverse. And Sigil is important here. But this is more broadly a planar kind of game to deal with the fact that Planescape was planar adventures. dealing with the inner planes, the outer planes, the ethereal planes, the prime material plane, the astral planes, all these other planes that are in the great cosmology of D&D. That's what Planescape is all about. That's in a lot of ways what Blood Wars is all about. So now that we know about the basics of Blood Wars, let's start by talking about all the various products that were released as part of the line. We can start with the first release. The first release was this big package that came out, and it was kind of in the area of Gen Con. Why do I say it was the area of Gen Con from 95? Well, basically, a basic set, an expansion, and a promo came out in 95. And was right around Gen Con. This is a box that you would have gotten for the first basic expansion, which was called, during this time period, Escalation Packs. I'll get into all of them, but this was a box you would have gotten with some Escalation Packs to begin your collections. This original release was 334 cards, divided up between two different things. They were sold in 2 50-card dual decks and 15-card boosters. Here's a picture of the dual decks. So each of these was, hey, 50 cards in one of them. So we have our dual decks, our Escalation Park, our one promo out. I'll show the promo a little later on. We've got our setting. We've got everything out there. The rarity, just to start talking about these, because we're going to kind of dive into rarity as we talk about the products here, were common, uncommon, rare, and chase. It's important to talk about these because chase cards aren't always in the same thing. They're like an ultra rare, and it depends on the print sheet too. The dual decks here did not have chase cards. It was common, uncommon, and rare. So that's an important thing to talk about. These had a rulebook, 2 50-card decks. There was only 300 cards in the dual deck park. There's a unique card in here, we'll talk about in a second, but these 300 cards were released on basically sets of 5 print sheets. When we talk about print sheets, that's the matter of like all the cards printed together on things. Sometimes we talk about print sheets that leak Magic cards or other card games. It's basically you start out with one large sheet and cut the cards down to the appropriate sizes from the sheet, and it's the kind of the way you start on it. So these had 5 print sheets with their commons, uncommons, rares, a Battlefield and Warlord. They had a common, uncommon, rare, Battlefield and Warlord sheet. That's important because those are 2 types of cards. They were only those 2 types of cards. But there are also Battlefield and Warlord cards that could be found on the other sheets. That's confusing. Anyway, it was 150 commons, 100 commons, and 50 rares that was in here. So that's our start of our entire basic set, as we know it. And depending on where you're getting cards from, depends on what's in it. Traditionally, it was, you'd only get like 3 rares in each one of the boxes, so you'd have 6 rares for this 100 cards. So that's kind of the numbers I would say, and 26 uncommons per each, so 52 uncommons, 6 rares, and the rest commons. I'm going by some numbers I have, and I have to do quick math in my head because they don't tell you the math very well. Anyway. Here's the card that wasn't in anything else other than the dual deck releases. Yeah. There's no good reason, but this Warlord card, Bladeling Hero, is only in the dual deck packs. Only place it's released. The other 299 cards are going to have an additional release. I'm going to talk about it. But Bladeling Hero, only here. And I will also mention, which is very important to tell you, there were 3 print sets of this basic set. The same 300 cards, and basically the basic set was just the dual decks. Although the dual decks were released a lot. The first Escalation Pack kinda was out there too, so those were also technically reprinted, but they were Escalation Packs that are side kind of subset of this entire thing. It's a kind of confusing mess with that. We'll talk about it. This was the first Reinforcement Pack, the first expansion, which is kind of weird because it was released with the basic set. Now, it is different because it has 34 unique cards in it. Yes, this has 333 cards. It's got the 299 cards from the basic set that were only in the dual decks, plus 34 unique chase cards. Yeah. And of those 33 were more rare chase cards, and one was ultra rare, Lady of Pain. We'll take a look at her in a minute, because I'm going to use her for an example for when we look over the cards and how the cards work. But yeah. So yes, this first 15 card booster pack had 299 cards from the dual decks, 34 chase cards. And this was released alongside all the rest of them on March 1995. So if you were going to get one of these booster packs, you get 8 commons, 2 from each of the sheets that existed, 4 uncommons, 2 rares, and a chase card. Though, sometimes you get that ultra rare chase card. But this is the general makeup you get. You get 8 commons, 4 uncommons, 2 rares, and one of the 34 cards, which one of them might be Lady of Pain. And yes, again, the commons, uncommons, and rares are going to just be of what's in the starter sets. Those 34 chase cards, you can only get 1 per pack. So, now we've released the initial release, and this was all in March of 1995. We now get into the second wave of releases. These were all in June, and this basically accounts for everything else that came out. Mostly. They were June into August being the last one, but this was June. June also had us with the first reprinting of the basic set. Hey, a second printing of it. And this brings us to second Escalation Pack, Factols, and Factions. Now, this is going to be a lot different than the previous one in many ways. It doesn't reprint those 299 cards. But instead, this is a unique 134 card set. This pack was basically focusing on Sigil. Again, I never know which one to pronounce it as. But anyway, it's the City of Doors, dealing with its leaders, legions. It's basically secret societies, all those kind of things. It had 100 commons, uncommons, and rares, and 34 chase cards. Yay! Chase cards! The exact breakdown was... do I have the exact breakdown? Sorry, I'm trying to just check my numbers for the exact breakdown of commons, uncommons. But it was a chunk of chase cards in there, too. So, yes, I don't have the exact numbers off the top of my head, and I'm not going to do quick, trying to, add them together in my brain for the difference between them. But, yeah, it was 100 cards that were broken down into that sort of original thing of common, uncommon, rare, and then 34 chase cards that made this. And all these are all unique cards then, too. Keep that in mind. But then, interestingly enough, there were 2 mixes of how the packs would work in this release. Still 15 card booster packs, but these mixes basically gave more rarity to those chase cards. Those 34 unique chase cards. And of the chase cards, there was one ultra rare chase card, again, the Key of Pain, which had the same frequency as Lady of Pain from the first Escalation expansion. But this one, the 2 mixes were 10 commons in both of them, 4 uncommons in both of them, and then the big difference was a rare or a chase card. Out of 3 packs, 2 of them will have a rare, 1 will have a chase card. So this treated things like how mythic rares are more nowadays for Magic Gather. How most packs have normal rares, but occasionally you get a mythic rare. In this case, for every 2 rares you got 1 chase card, which is, I guess, an ultra rare, but also the chase cards have an ultra rare and Key of Pain. It's a little bit of a weirdness there. Anyway, then we get to August. Fact here doesn't look very different, but we're now on to Powers and Proxies, the final expansion that was released. Not planned, but released, and this is August 1995. And again, we have the basic set printed. Hey, cool. And we have a similar format to the last one, with this last 15-card booster pack. This one deals with powerful avatars of the Outer Planes becoming available in 95 of August. And this was first seen and released at Gen Con Game Fair in Milwaukee. And it consisted of 134 cards, like the previous one, pretty much the same. 100 commons, uncommons, and rares, 34 chase cards. This ultra rare in this one and the chase cards was the Floating Gods. Again, once again, 2 mixes of packs. This time, 2 out of the 3 boosters, and these are very different, so I'm going to go over them completely. 2 of your 3 booster packs are going to be 9 commons, 4 uncommons, 2 rares. 1 out of 3 replaces one of those commons with a chase card. So yes, unlike before, in factals and factions, when you replaced your rare card with chase card, this one, you're always getting 2 rare cards in powers and proxies. You just are replacing a common with a chase card. I like this a lot better. It's still 1 out of 3 that you're getting the chase card, but still. But it did see these kind of like 4 kind of big releases that kind of happened, these different releases that happened to add to this. Now, there were other plans to release more product. Basically, there were technically 3 expansions that were being planned. Yeah, there are 3 expansions that were being planned. And technically 2 have kind of been released. I'm going to tell you that. I'm just going to say, you can probably look up online now that in 2023, using some of the information that was being provided for 2 of the plans, the Insurgents of the Inner Planes and Weapons of Warmongers, a fan-made version of them were created using the information I looked up. I didn't dive into much about them. I don't usually talk about a lot of fan-made content, but I'm going to tell you, they're theoretically based a lot on the original cards, but basically, Insurgents of the Inner Planes was planned for March of 1996, never released. Weapons of Warmongers in 96, it was also canceled, and Hand of Fate was going to be also 96 and canceled. The 3 of them would have been basically expanding upon the game even more. TSR was dying. I talked about it at the beginning of this. TSR was dying. This game was not successful enough to save them, but again, it was a decent product that was helping them probably a little bit. Insurgents of the Inner Planes, it was halted at the printer in February of 96. So we have enough information to know that one was going to print. It was halted in February. That's why that fan-made version of it was able to be made. Because probably out there, someone found the original sheets and stuff on this. The original stuff that was going to be planned to be sent to printer. And I'm sure Weapons and Warmongers, there was enough for that one. Hands of Fate, probably too early on in development for that one to actually get a fan-made revisit to these expansions that were being planned and created. Because again, we're not just talking about the entire thing being canceled without work being done. Things were being canceled in farther along. Remember, this is February of 96. They were working on these things. They were making progress. Insurgents of the Inner Planes, almost done. Going to printer. Cancel the print. Yeah. These 3 other Escalation Packs probably had some stuff somewhere in somebody's information all about them. There was a book related to this that was printed. But... Oh, I'm sorry. I was supposed to switch this to talk about. This is a poster that you can get for Blood Wars. I was supposed to talk about when I went to the Insurgents. Whoopsie. Anyway. I'll have to mark that up. But there was a book. The Warlord's Tactical Manual. This was a player's guide that was released in January of 1996 to accompany things and teach you about the gameplay. To help you out with deck building and stuff like that. Go over the official rules, probably a lot of show stuff for helping with tournaments and clarifications when there's something's obscurity. You know, basics of a lot of these. Here's that promo card. Remember I talked about there was a promo card? Well, here it is. This was the Gen Con promo that came out. Guardian of Moldova. Yeah. It was released in 1995. It was a Fate card. One of the 4 types of cards in play. We'll talk about all the different types of cards, how they work, all those different things in this. It was technically of the chase rarity, technically. But again, being a promo card released at Gen Con 1995 doesn't say a lot about it. But there was a promo card for this one. Just the one. Let's take a look at the cards. Let's learn about the cards. Here's that Lady of Pain, the ultra rare from the first set of chase cards from Rebels and Reinforcements. Let's use her to talk all about how these cards work. So if we go all the way over to that upper left corner, we have that nice square. What the hell does that square mean? Well, the square first lists the alignment by letter and color. She is lawful evil. And there is combat strength or intrigue strength, the CS or IS. You can see that she has an IS there. And then there's the random results, the RR. All these numbers will mean stuff when I talk about the rules, but yes. The only thing is, if you are a battlefield, one of the 4 types of cards here, when I talk about the type of cards, I'll go over all of them. It lists victory points rather than combat strength or intrigue strength. We, of course, have the name at the top, the illustration. The framing on the illustration actually matters. Warlords have the shield shape, legions have an oblong shape, and others are in a square. As you can see over on the side, the type of card is identified. Warlord, Legion, Battlefield, Fate. This is a Warlord. We have down there in the bottom corner an icon, which usually identifies a plane, the home plane of a Legion or a Warlord, Battlefield, or type of Fate card. When we talk about symbols, we'll kind of go over that. And then, of course, we got the text box. The text box contains descriptive, special rules. Sometimes they'll have extra symbols on there that require things like flipping a card, discarding a card, or sending it to a dead book, which is kind of exile. I'll tell you, there's a discard pile, there's a dead book, which is kind of like exile, and then there's also flipping cards. All these we'll talk about mechanics when we go over the basic rules, but just to give you an understanding, that's the card and how it's structured. It's fairly simple. Things like alignment do matter. We'll talk about that. But the 2 big numbers are the first number right below the L over there, the lawful. That, again, being your combat strength, intrigue strength, or victory points. And then the random number, which matters in a random result, which does matter in a couple of places, very weirdly. Let's talk about the different card types. Of course, we have battlefields. Hey, this is the first one, and this is the very most important one. These are the things that you're going to be using to gain victory points. The astral plane here gets you 2 victory points. Yeah. This is basically where you're fighting out your wars in order to gain victory. I'll explain it all in the rules. Then, of course, you have your fate cards. These are your instant sorcery type cards. They're your extra spells, maybe, only. These are things that are basically enhancing or altering how a battle will go. The fate card will usually mention when it's played. Most of the time, these are played during various kind of combat-y type things or encounters type things, whether they're a combat or intrigue-based encounter. We have our legions. These are our armies, our groups, are these beings that are working directly for our warlords. And then, of course, I'm sure you can get the Anki here. I had of course, a sneak attack on the other one. Thought it was appropriate for rogues and stuff. And then, of course, with Cat Lord here, we have our warlords. These are your beings that are basically in charge of the battle, leading it. Basically, they're your generals. Now that we know the card types, we can begin talking about gameplay. And I'm going to show you something that's very scary. This chart. I'm going to explain this chart in a minute. It's not scary. It looks scary. Let's start with the basics. So, we're the Blood Wars. We're fighting it out. We're 2 warlords, their legions, their fate cards, battling each other over battlefields for victory. That's the basic idea. And again, you can have anybody from, technically they say from 2 to infinite players in the basic rules, and they recommend 4 or 5 for a great game. It's a multiplayer game more than anything, kind of like how Commander and Magic is. Multiplayer is key, but you can play with 2 players. Again, 8 is kind of like the top end that I feel like most people would say is the best. And yeah. Now, let's build our deck. Here is the deck building chart. They say you can have the Blood Wars, basically the deck out of the box. Remember I talked about the deck packs? You could just get one of those. Or you could tailor your own deck from 40 to 100 cards. Here's where important things come in here. Because there are rules and limits for building your deck. let's go look all the way at the left there at that 40 chart. And I'm going to go down the list here and explain everything that means here. Cool? Great? We understand it? All right. So, everything on this list tells you the number of cards for that for that size deck that you're having, a range of them, and then a max value, which is the numbers of all the cards you're using combined. Let's take example the Warlord over there. In my 40 card deck, I'm only allowed to have 3 to 5 Warlords. No more, no less. Again, each player can have a different number deck size from 40 to 100. That's the example they give there. They really want you in this range here. And they want you in sets of 10, so keep that in mind. But basically, there will be similar builds in each. The fact is, in my 40 card deck, my 3 to 5 Warlords, their max IS, Intrigue strength, combined can be 60 at most. That means all their Intrigue added together cannot be greater than 60. That number does go up as you get more max Warlords in the side there, but yeah, it does mean that, like, you know, in a 100 card deck, I could have 3 Warlords that would add up to 120, which they'd be very powerful Warlords, but I wouldn't have many of them, which could be bad for me overall. You know, I have less options. In a lot of ways, like, your Warlords are your jack of all trades. I'll explain how the entire combat system, how everything works here, but it's good to have a decent number of them. Next up is your Legions, which are your warriors that you're going to be sending with your Warlords. In your 40 card deck, you can have 10 to 20 of them. The max combat strength of those Legions adds up to 120. Again, there's a max value that you do have to do some math when you're building this deck, but you can understand it. Your battlefields, the things that you use to score victory points, are from 5 to 12. Now, there are subtypes of battlefields. You can see there's Realm Layers, Site Town, and a maximum number of them, but you just have to remember, in your 40 card deck, the maximum victory points your battlefields add up to has to be 40. That's the only thing you have to know. And then you have fate cards, which is any from 0 to 15, and certain types of fate cards, you can have certain numbers of them, again, depending on your deck size. But, you know, if you're having a... You can basically have minimum of the... There really isn't... They say 0 to 15, but I think it's technically a 3, because if I had maximum in the others, the 5, 20, and 12... add up to 40, that would be 37, meaning I'd have to have a minimum 3 fate cards. So I don't know why they say 0 with fate cards. I'm gonna be honest. It's a little weirdness there. It's just kind of like some of the battlefields, some of the subtypes. You have maximums of those types of subtypes. I'm sure some don't fall under that. So, like, there are things that aren't realms, layers, or sites and towns, and they're just other ones. Yeah. Anyway. It's not a difficult chart to understand, but it's one of those things is when you are building a deck, you do have to keep all these numbers in mind for your Blood Wars deck. Here's the symbols. I copied this page out of the book. I will provide in the description of the YouTube comments. I'll also link the Board Game Geek site for Blood Wars here. I'll link it in the Twitch chat also, for those of you that want to see it there, but I'll also put it in the link there. The rules are on there. You can find the copy of the Blood Wars rules there. That's the one I'm using here. It's a copy of the rules book. Again, it's a great place to check it out. You can see the activators. Those are the 3 symbols for the activations you can have a card do. Flipping, discarding, basically exiling, dead booking it. The general icons, which the general icons I feel like are basically things like Lady Plane is an avatar. This is the kind of stuff you'd have a lot of fate cards, where they do different things. Items, spells, support, orders, fractal, acolyte, artifact, magical, you know, those kind of things. And then you have all the planar icons, which can matter for certain situations. Sometimes they don't. It depends on the cards you're playing. But these are all the symbols, just so you understand them. Most of these are very easy. Some of them aren't really easy. The planar ones, I think you have to kind of have a chart for it. If it matters for your deck, that's the only thing I can say. If it matters for your deck you're building. It might not matter the plain symbols at all for your deck. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Let's take a basic look at playing the game. We'll start with the basics, and I will get into some details better on the turns, but I'll kind of summarize things first. And this is the kind of basic layout. You can see your draw pile. your discard pile, and your dead book. And then you have your victory pool, and then you have your warlords and battle hands that are in play. I'll explain all this. Just keep it in mind. So, there are 5 sequences in your turn. 5 little phases. Plus a phase you have before the game begins. Basically, before the game begins thing is, you have to choose some important things. First off, the amount of VP you need to win the game. That's pretty big. How much VP do we have to earn? Remember, your maximum in your 40 card deck is 40. So, probably if you're playing a 40 card deck, 40 would be the maximum. You're asking for a long game then, honestly speaking. But again, the amount of time, we'll talk about it a little bit. Then you have to choose the amount of muster period you have. These are amount of turns that you do not basically engage in combat of any kind. Then you collect your forces, which is drawing 6 cards. You have to have at least 1 warlord in your hand to begin the game. And then you use the random number. Remember we talked about that other corner, the random result? We use that to determine who's the first player. Your phases are opening phase. You draw 2 cards to your hand. 2, your assembly. You begin putting out legions and fate cards into your battle hands. I'll explain it. Then you have your third phase, your action phase. And again, your first turn you don't have an assembly phase. And during your muster rounds, you don't have your action phase, which is your challenges and rallying. Then your fourth phase is your resolution phase, where that's where you put in new warlords into play, where you might regroup your warlords, and then you might call the weak, which is basically discarding your hand down to 7. Then you have your victory phase, which is your last round, which is basically if someone has enough victory points, you win the game. Otherwise, you pass the turn to the left. There's some combat and intrigue summaries. I'm not going to talk about them because I feel like we're just going to talk about each of those more in depth. So we're going to move on to some more like in-depth gameplay. This is the back of one of the boxes there. Let's start with the basics. The pregame, the opening phase. This is the beginning of the game. So there is basically 3 numbers that you're looking at: conflict, battle, campaign. These are the lengths of VP. You can do a custom amount, I'm sure, but a conflict is a short game with 13 VP, a battle's a medium one with 19 VP, and a campaign is a long game with 25. Then you choose muster period. Initial number of turns which new challenges may be made. You're either taking 2, 4, or 6. Basically how much setup you have. Then you collect your forces, which is drawing your 6 cards to your command hand. I am going to refer to 2 different types of hands there because you do have 2 different hands in this game, your command hand and your battle hand. I'll explain the difference between them, but just know that this is like your basic hand is your command hand, your normal one. If you don't have a warlord, you discard your entire hand and draw another 6 cards and repeat until you get a warlord. This is important. Let me tell you, just because you're discarding cards doesn't mean you won't use them again. Just keep that in mind. But yes, you discard your 6 cards, you draw until you get a warlord. Then, the first player basically is determined by everybody drawing the top card of your deck and discarding it, and whoever's random result is the highest takes the first turn, ties basically draw another one, keeping and discarding them, and then you go clockwise. The first phase is drawing 2 cards into your hand. That's it. Here's the important part. If your deck is depleted, you shuffle your discards and make a new draw deck. There you go. This is one of those games where if your deck is depleted, you just shuffle your discard. Pretty simple, pretty easy. That's where you get it. We're going to go through some ads now because I like the ads for here. Let's talk about the assembly phase. So this is the first big phase before we get into basically combat-y type stuff. This is where you place Legion and Fate cards to build or augment your battle hands. And they are subject to certain rules. So this isn't done the first turn because battle hands are connected to warlords. You don't have a warlord out on your first turn. You're not assembling anything. So, when it comes to basically second turn onwards, during your assembly phase, let's say I have a warlord out. I can place legions with that warlord stacked with it. So, yes, battle hands can be assembled under warlords currently on the table and not flipped. This is another important thing. So if you flipped a warlord by your assembly phase, for whatever reason, or flipped it and haven't been able to flip it back because you flip it over in phase 4, if you flipped it over on someone else's turn, you can't basically assemble anything on it. But your battle hand is basically a set of cards that you're associating with that warlord to be used with them when they go to battle. 4 legions can be under that if their alignment and the warlords match at least one of the letters. Lady of Pain was LE, Lawful Evil. That means I could have 4 legions. That would be a combination of some of them being lawful, some of them being evil. But it has to be one or the other. If, on the other hand, I have one that matches both, I can stack up to 6. So basically, yes, 6 can be stacked if they match the warlord's alignment exactly. I have a bunch of lawful evil stuff, but I can stack them all with the Lady of Pain. Fate cards can be stacked for the battle hand as well, but they cannot exceed the number of legions in the stack. Again, the thing is, you're playing from your hand the stuff to the battle hand face up. Legion and Fate cards in a battle hand, are hidden from the view of opponents. They're normally revealed during combat. Okay, so you don't play them face up. So like you basically saying like, I'm playing legions here, and the fact is, when you reveal them, when a challenge begins, you are showing off. You can't really hide the fact you're doing anything. You can't really cheat it. So you have to have the correct number of legions. They are hidden. And the same thing is, however many legions you have, you can have that number of fate cards too. Okay. Any number of cards during your assembly phase can be exchanged from your command hand to battle hand, from battle hand to command hand, or from battle hand to battle hand. Here's the thing. You can have multiple warlords. Remember, you have multiple in your deck. Each one has their own battle hand. Each one has their own legions. Each one has their own fate cards. So, during the assembly phase, when you're playing out stuff from your hand, you can move these cards between these different hands. Remember, they aren't shown. I can take that battle hand under here, look at it, exchange stuff with my command hand. I can take things from my command hand, put it in a battle hand. Again, they have to be within the rules for when they're revealed and basically be legal. The 4, 6, depending on the matching for legions, and same fate cards, 4 or 6, depending on that. But again, you kind of have an idea. And there's your assembly phase. Let's talk about the 2 big things in the room. Combat and Intrigue. This is your action phase. So just as a note, the action phase works like this. I present a battlefield from my command hand, from my normal hand. I declare which type of challenge I'm making. Intrigue or combat. It goes through the rules, and then I can possibly repeat this any number of times. But here's the limits on it. Each time it has to be a new battlefield, and new challengers, new defenders. Until I, as the acting player, either capture a battlefield, or I decide not to issue more challenges. So I can throw out these battlefields any number of times, but it has to be a new battlefield, and it starts with everything else is new then. The challengers, the defenders, all those kind of things are new at that point in time. But yes, as long as I have those battlefields to throw out from my hand, I can try to capture any number of them. But as soon as I capture one, I'm done. I can only capture one battlefield per turn. I can try to capture any number, but then I'm failing a lot. Here's how Intrigue works. This is your first choice. Basically, the active player chooses a challenger from amongst your unflipped warlords that you have. Okay, warlords that aren't unflipped, I choose one, that's my challenger. Then, starting counterclockwise, going to the right, every player may choose one of their unflipped warlords and basically choose to either oppose or support this challenge. If you choose to be an opposer, you're a defender. If you choose to be a supporter, you're on basically the challenger side. Then, beginning with the person who's a challenger and going counterclockwise, each warlord involved in the complex can use their intrigue power. Then, any legions with intrigue powers in that player's command hands activate those powers. And this begins, again, with the challenger and goes to the right. Players who have fate cards in their command hands may play them during this time. I'm noting there, Intrigue, fate cards, command hand. Those fake cards that are played with warlords are good for combat, not intrigue. So, then you kind of add things together. Whoever has the highest IS and the challenge, the defender with the highest IS and the challenger each draw 1 from their decks as a hidden ally, adding its random rate to the total IS for their side. So there's a little bit of like an extra randomness to this entire thing, that you basically flip over a card and whatever its RR is gets added to your side of it. And also note that there is things, if a warlord is flipped upside down because of its power, it is worth a different value. We'll talk about that in a second here. But yes. So, the challenger side's total IS, and this is from you and anybody that supports you, and any of the legions that gave you bonuses, any fake cards that gave you bonuses, and of course the RR is added together. And the defender side does the same with their IS. The battlefield is 1 if the acting player put, if the challenger side is larger, the battle is 1, and the acting player puts the battlefield in their victory pool. Allies of a victorious challenger draw a number of cards equal to the number of warlords involved on their side of the challenge, and add them to their command hand as a bonus. So, if I decide to go after this battlefield, and basically of our, let's say, 5-player game, 2 players join with me, we have 3 warlords on our side, we get to draw 3, they get to draw 3 cards. That's their payment. I, as the person who made this challenge, just get the victory points. They get 3 cards, which could have a big effect. If the challenger side is less than or equal to the defenders, the battlefield is discarded. Goes to discard. Any legions and fake cards in the challenger's battle hand are returned to the player's command hand. And the challenger is flipped. So basically, the warlord, its hand gets emptied into your command hand, and the challenger's flipped, which might be important. Remember, that could be important, because there's a discard, and you placed things on that warlord before this phase. So there is a loss that you can possibly have. The defender and their allies draw a number of cards equal to the number of warlords involved on their side, adding to their command hands. They get a reward. Then, all warlords that were involved in this entire thing get flipped, along with the battle hands they lead. So yes. And if a warlord is discarded or sent to the dead book for any reason during an intrigue challenge, it discards the entire battle hand that he leads. May I renote. So yeah, there's intrigue. An interesting kind of subset of things. Kind of neat. The combat side of things. This again, a challenger chooses an unflipped warlord. He removes his command hand. He removes from his command hand any fake cards he wishes to devote to the battle and places them next to the challenger's battle hand. Remember, fake cards in the battle hand have normal stacking limits. But before the battle begins, because I've already placed cards there, because there's an extra hand, that I don't have to worry about my maximum hand size, so it might be good to put those fake cards under the specific guy ahead of time. But before that battle, I can put some more to the side, some more fake cards, and I'm like, these are some additional fake cards that are going to be part of this battle that were in my hand that I didn't associate with that guy, because again, maximum's there. And then I put my command hand aside and pick up my entire battle hand. Basically, you start with the player to your right, counterclockwise, and every player has the opportunity to oppose your combat challenge. Basically, the person to your right says, do I want to oppose it? They might say yes, they might say no. If they say no, it moves to the next person counterclockwise, and each person has a choice to oppose you. The first player to declare the intent to oppose you becomes the defender, and has to choose from them an unflipped warlord. I've chosen an unflipped warlord, they choose one too. So, combat is one-on-one, unlike intrigue, which is everybody involved. The defender does the same as you. They take any fake cards from their command hand, devoting it to this battle, put it next to their battle hand for their defender, place their command hand aside, and take their new bigger hand, ready for this battle. And again, because you're placing these extra aside, the fake cards in a normal hand might exceed the battle limit. But again, you know, because I'm saying, like, I'm putting these 3 aside to my battle hand for this round, your opponent would know that you've got 3 extra fate cards that are in there than what you normally would have. You know, it's you know how many fate cards someone should have when they're picking up their battle hand. Then battle happens. Powers activate from the various challenges. If a warlord has a combat power, they can use it. This may involve flipping them or something else. If they're flipped, the warlord counts as a 5 in a, you know, intrigue score. If it matters in that one, a 5 IS. Intrigue strength. So just keep that in mind. Legions then activate any powers they have. The Challenger, again, it's always Challenger starts first and then Defender for these things. So for Warlords, we activate Warlord powers first. I activate mine as the Challenger. The Defender activates theirs. Then I activate my Legion powers. But for the Legion powers, it's an alternating sequence. So I activate one of my Legions. They activate one of their Legions if they're using powers and abilities and stuff like that. And we go back and forth until neither side has anybody that can do something. So if, like, I have to pass, like, I don't have any Legions that have any powers, then yes. And then if you use a Legion power, you flip it over, and it's, you know, its combat strength becomes 1 rather than their normal combat strength. Kind of like the Warlord that flips over, it becomes 5 IS, should the card refer to their 5S rather than their normal one. Again, that's if IS matters, which it doesn't always for combat, but sometimes does. Again, Warlords have an IS, not a combat strength. Sometimes that helps, sometimes that doesn't. But it's important to know when it's flipped, it's 5. Anyway, then you compare the 2 numbers. That's it. You add up all the numbers together. You figure out from your bonuses, from your fate cards, from your, you know, legions, all that kind of numbers. You add them together. You get these 2 numbers. The Challenger and Defender's numbers. All the legions, all the fate cards. Compare them. And again, flipped ones, flipped legions, and fate cards are only worth 1 combat value if they should flip. Highest total is victorious, though Defender wins ties. If the Defender wins, they draw a card and gets this random resource number. Basically, it does an RR draw. And that number is how many cards they draw from their draw pile to their command hand. So it's like you draw 1 extra card to your discard, and its RR number is how many you draw. So if, like, I flip over a card and its RR is like 3, I draw 3 cards for, you know, winning the battle. If the Defender's defeated, they don't get anything. But, you know, if the Defender wins, they get some cards. The Challenger, if they're victorious, basically might not still win. What do I mean by that? You basically compare your combat score total and subtract the Defender's combat score from yours. You were already higher, hopefully, to win. If that number is equal to or higher than the victory point rating of the battlefield, you actually claim it. So if you're trying to claim a battlefield of like 5 victory points, which is a pretty big number, you have to exceed the Defender by 5 combat score. Yeah, the higher the victory, the harder it is to win it. You can tie, but you'll probably at least have to get 1 above you already have to get 1 above them, you know, because you lose on a tie. But yeah. So there could be a time when you don't get anything. Then both the Challenger and Defender are flipped. Basically, their Warlords are flipped and placed back on the player's other Warlords on the table, and their battle hands are discarded. So battle hands are used. There's another one of those things as we see where, like, cards can be drawn, how you can take turns to kind of set up things to be prepared, and to eventually, you know, get to that point in time where you're launching these big all-out offensive to gain things. Let's talk about the resolution and victory. So the resolution is you add in new Warlords from your command hand to the table. There is unique Warlords, which there can only be 1 on the board, which if you basically first come, first serve on those. Very Legends rule in old Magic, where the first person that has that legend is the only one. In this one, they have to have the unique marker, Warlord can only be out and play once, and whoever has it has them. If you have a unique Warlord in your hand, as long as that Warlord's in play, you can't play yours. It has to remain in your command hand. Then any flipped Warlords you have are unflipped. So that's an important thing for you as basically as an attacker doing intrigue or attacks. You get to choose, basically, you can use up the rest of your Warlords you did not use for defending or intrigue in between there. Basically, after my turn's done, I have all my Warlords available. I have my options to go into defense. I have my options to go into intrigue with those Warlords. Any I don't use, I can be the initiator in combat or intrigue. But it's sort of like I get to choose which one I'm using them first. And I get to flip them in at the end of my turn. And then I discard my command hand down to 7 cards, if necessary. And then we just see who has enough VP to win. At the end of your turn, we just see who has it. If not, we pass it to the left. Continue on. But there you go. There's Blood Wars. There's some extra rules, and I would recommend, if you're going to get into it, check out the rule book for some advanced rules and stuff like that. I'm not going to dive too deep into that kind of thing because we're just here to learn the basics of how to play. And this is a very interesting game. I think it's a little complex, but when I compare it to something like how Spellfire was, I enjoy Blood Wars' concept a lot better. I think it's a much more interesting idea of you're building up, like, you're using your hands to draw to build up these, like, armies that have abilities. And you're using these, like, extra hands you have under Warlords to be places to put cards. And I can understand why there's this muster phase of building up your first kind of Warlord or Warlords as you need them. You're kind of taking some turns to set things up and be ready to go against these battles, against these battlefields, these places to earn victory points. There's a lot of interesting concepts here and a little bit of a simplicity. There's 4 types of cards. There isn't very much complexity. It's a lot of math. I'm not going to lie. There really is a lot of math in this one. There's a lot of numbers-based things. But if you can get beyond that, there's some randomness, some interesting ideas that exist here that can make for a fun time. I can see why one of the things about Blood Wars is it reviewed much better than Spellfire. It's a pretty well multiplayer game that is much better than Spellfire. People liked it better. Was it good enough to save TSR? Hell no. I'll be honest. It might have been more successful if TSR wasn't already dying. That's the thing. Looking at this, I feel like if TSR was on it up and up and not in its death throes as it had started in this time period, this might have succeeded as a basic game for a little while longer. We probably would have got all the expansions they planned out. But again, getting to the depths of it, no. And when Wizards bought TSR, they're not going to do more card games. They have Magic. They don't need Spellfire. They don't need Blood. But this is the other D&D card game that existed. It's a fascinating thing to explore, and I hope you enjoyed learning all about it. But that'll be it for me. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you check out more of my stuff, whether it's over on Twitch or YouTube. On the Twitch side of things, I record videos like this. I do live plays of TTRPGs. Fall of Emmonswell Wednesdays at 8 is my current one. I do recommend checking that one out, but I do some other ones. And all the older games are archived over on YouTube if you want to go check out the full series there. I also have Discussing Tabletop Saturdays at 6. It's my podcasty kind of talk show kind of thing where me and my friends talk about big news in the tabletop world, interesting products that come out, and some deeper topics that can help you improve your games. Those all goes up on YouTube also. I do some other things on Twitch, gaming friends, hanging out, chatting, all those kind of basic things. You know, some variety gaming. But yes, if you just want to see tabletop stuff, you can go over to YouTube, check it out there. Just remember, again, the liking and subscribing thing. And hey, would you be interested in checking out Blood Wars now? That's another expansion of my question, you know. Not just did you play it. Would you be interested in trying it out? I certainly think this would be a fun one to try out. And I'm interested to know what happened with the kind of online expansions people came up with a couple years ago. The Insurgents of the Plains and Weapons of Warmont. How I want to kind of look into how well they're connected to the original. But again, they're fan stuff, so they're not official releases. Right? But, all right. Anyway, check out my social media for updates. Discord's the best one. And until the next time, we hang out, chat gaming, do anything of the such. I bid all of you out there a deep and wonderful farewell.